You scroll YachtWorld at midnight and you see her. A 32-meter motor yacht, gleaming white, twin MTU diesels, listed at $4.8 million. The photos are immaculate, teak deck polished to a mirror finish, varnished saloon glowing under the photographer's lights, engine room shots showing pristine paint, color-coded hoses, labeled valves. The broker tells you the owner is motivated. The previous survey was clean. The boat has been lightly used. She is, in his exact words, turnkey. And your brain starts doing the math. Mortgage payment, fuel budget, marina fees, captain's salary. You can almost see yourself stepping aboard for the Mediterranean summer. And then, 6 months after you sign, after the wire transfer clears, after the champagne photo on the back deck, after the boat is yours, the first invoice lands. And it does not say $4,000. It does not say $40,000. It says $400,000. And your brain asks the only question that matters. What did I miss? What was hiding in plain sight that the survey didn't catch, the broker didn't disclose, and the previous owner knew was coming? Today, we are going to forensically dismantle the $400,000 yacht mistake. Why buyers in the $400K to $10 million asset class repeatedly walk into a hidden financial cliff 6 to 18 months after closing. Why the survey they paid for didn't protect them. Why the documentation they trusted was incomplete. And what those invoices actually reveal about the deep structural cracks running through luxury yacht acquisitions in 2026. Stick around to the end because I will give you a simple 5-step pre-purchase forensic filter, a 1-minute system you can apply to any yacht you are considering before you sign anything, to know if you are about to inherit a $400,000 problem or actually buy a sound asset. All right, let's make sense of the chaos. The first big idea you have to understand is that $400,000 is not an arbitrary number. It is not a worst-case scenario. It is not a 1 in 100 outcome. It is a structural threshold in the luxury marine market. It is the price point at which deferred maintenance, obscured mechanical history, fraudulent finishing techniques, and administrative shortcuts converge into a single, brutal capital core. The $400,000 mistake is rarely sudden.
It is the cumulative result of a buyer treating a yacht like a lifestyle accessory rather than a high-performance industrial asset operating in one of the most hostile environments on Earth: saltwater, constant vibration, thermal cycling, UV exposure, galvanic corrosion, biological growth. Every system on the boat is being attacked, every hour, every day, whether the boat is running or sitting at the dock. And the moment the maintenance regime slips, the asset starts compounding hidden liabilities silently for 5 years, sometimes 10, until the next owner inherits the bill. That next owner is who this video is for. Once you understand this, the entire luxury yacht market starts to make sense. Now let's break down the forces that create the $400K mistake. The first force is the mechanical abyss, and this is where the biggest hidden invoices come from. The single largest mechanical liability on any 30 to 40 meter motor yacht is the propulsion system. Almost universally, that means MTU or Caterpillar diesel engines. These are not pickup truck engines scaled up. They are high-performance, high-stress, precision-built industrial machines designed for extreme power-to-weight ratios, and they come with a maintenance regime that is both rigid and prohibitively expensive. MTU classifies pleasure craft engines, the 1DS rating, under a structured maintenance schedule called the echelon system. Echelons run from W1 through W6. W1 through W3 are minor maintenance intervals at roughly 500 to 1,000 hours. Oil analysis, filter replacement, valve adjustment, zinc replacement, roughly $15,000 to $25,000 per service. Annoying but manageable. W4 and W5 are top-end overhauls at 2,500 to 3,000 hours, cylinder head refurbishment, cooling system descaling, turbocharger service, between $75,000 and $150,000 per engine, significant but absorbable. And then there is W6. W6 is a complete engine overhaul, total disassembly down to the engine block, replacement of cylinder liners, replacement of pistons, replacement of main bearings, complete refurbishment of turbochargers, complete refurbishment of fuel injection pumps, complete refurbishment of cooling systems. W6 is triggered every 6,000 hours or every 8 years, whichever comes first. And the cost is where the $400,000 mistake gets its name. For a 30 to 40 meter yacht, a W6 overhaul typically lands between 400,000 and 600,000 euros per engine.
On a vessel exceeding 50 meters, that figure can escalate to $1 million per engine. Most of these yachts have 2 engines, sometimes 3. Now here is the mechanism that catches buyers. A buyer sees a vessel listed with 5,800 engine hours. The broker frames it as low hours. The survey notes the engines run smoothly. The seller has no incentive to mention what's coming. The buyer signs, the wire clears, and 200 hours of cruising later, the engines hit 6,000 hours. The W6 threshold trips. The invoice arrives, $400,000 to $1 million per engine. That is the $400,000 mistake in its purest form. It was not hidden, it was just not understood. The second force is the mechanism of failure, and this is where the engine compartment tells stories the survey never captures. The most documented failure mode in high-displacement marine diesels is cylinder glazing. Glazing happens when the seal between the piston wings and the cylinder walls is compromised. The fine cross-hatching pattern on the cylinder liner, machined at the factory to hold a thin layer of oil, gets polished smooth by abnormal operating conditions. Once that cross-hatching is gone, the oil layer breaks down. Combustion gases blow past the rings. Oil consumption goes vertical. Thermal stability collapses, and the only fix is total disassembly. On the naval tanker Endeavour, 3 of 12 cylinders suffered from glazing. The repair bill came in at $400,000. That is a documented number on a documented vessel. And glazing is not exotic. It is one of the most common ways high-hour marine diesels die. Then there's the inverse problem, low-usage vessels, the lifestyle boat that sits at the dock 11 months a year and runs for 2 weekends in the Caribbean. Buyers love these boats because the hours are low. Brokers market them aggressively. The reality is much darker. Engines that sit idle for extended periods suffer from internal corrosion as condensation cycles through the cylinders. Seals dry out, bearings lose their oil film, and the fuel itself starts to degrade. Modern ethanol-blended gasoline absorbs moisture from the marine environment. Over time, the fuel undergoes phase separation. It splits into a water-rich lower layer and an octane-depleted upper layer. Running the engine on that depleted upper layer causes detonation, pre-ignition, and catastrophic piston failure.
The counterintuitive truth, which expert engine surveyors will tell you privately, is that a yacht with high operational hours is often a safer acquisition than one that is sat idle. Regular use maintains the integrity of internal seals. Regular use maintains lubrication. Regular use cycles the fuel before phase separation begins. The boat that has been used hard, maintained well, and documented carefully is almost always the smarter buy than the boat that sat at a marina for 10 years gathering dust. Most buyers do exactly the opposite. The third force is structural camouflage, and this is where the cosmetic experience of the yacht actively works against the buyer. Woodwork and teak decking are the primary cosmetic face of any luxury yacht. They are also one of the most common places to hide structural deficiencies. On vessels where woodworking standards have lapsed, finishers use a technique called varnish stacking. Layers of flattened varnish are built up over failing teak miter joints to obscure the fact that the joints have already failed or were poorly fitted from the start. To extend the deception further, faux grain lines are drawn by hand between the layers of varnish. The eye sees continuous wood grain, the buyer sees craftsmanship. The reality underneath is split joinery and rotten core. The diagnostic indicator is the presence of heavy, opaque finishes specifically at wood joints. As the vessel flexes in any sea state, those rigid finishes crack. Moisture penetrates the core.
If the underlying structure is solid teak, naturally oily and rot-resistant, the damage may stay localized. But if the visible teak is just a thin veneer over a plywood or composite core, which is increasingly the case on production builds, the moisture causes widespread delamination and rot underneath. That is a $400,000 structural refit, and it does not show up in photos. It does not show up in a casual walkthrough, and unless the surveyor is specifically looking for stacked varnish at joint lines, it does not show up in the survey either. The teak itself is a separate disaster waiting to happen. First-grade Burmese stem teak now exceeds $18,000 per cubic meter. A new teak deck installation on a mid to large-sized vessel runs between €1,500 and €2,500 per square meter when professionally installed using systems like Sika or Simpson.
A mid-grade or wild teak alternative drops to €800 to €1,200 per square meter, but it twists and degrades within 5 to 10 years. Synthetic PVC or composite alternatives sit around €85 to €110 per square meter and last 15 to 25 years with minimal maintenance, but they are not what luxury buyers want to see. A mid-grade or wild teak alternative drops to €800 to €1,200 per square meter, but it twists and degrades within 5 to 10 years. Synthetic PVC or composite alternatives sit around €85 to €110 per square meter and last 15 to 25 years with minimal maintenance, but they are not what luxury buyers want to see. And here is where the trap closes. Many sellers will have the deck aggressively sanded to make it look fresh for sale photos. Each sanding pass removes a fraction of a millimeter of teak depth. Once the wood is worn down to 3 millimeters or less, the fastening screws and bungs become exposed. At that point, every fastener becomes a water ingress point into the subdeck. Recaulking can temporarily slow the damage at €750 to €1,200 per square meter, but provides zero structural benefit if the teak itself has reached its wear limit. A buyer who steps aboard sees a beautiful sanded teak deck and assumes that beauty equals integrity is exactly the buyer who inherits the refit. The fourth force is administrative liability, and this is the invisible $400,000 mistake that has nothing to do with the boat itself. In the European Union and the United Kingdom, the VAT-paid status of a vessel is fundamental to its market value. A yacht without verifiable proof of VAT payment carries a hidden liability equivalent to 20% of its valuation. On a €2 million vessel, that is €400,000 of pure tax exposure. The T2L document is the proof. It establishes that the vessel has the status of union goods, which means it has cleared customs and paid VAT within the EU. Failure to provide the T2L or a valid VAT-paid invoice means the vessel can be treated as a third-country import every single time it crosses a territorial border. And then there is the customs warehousing trap. Vessels that have been incorrectly declared under a warehousing procedure, Customs Code 7100, instead of being released for free circulation under Code 4000, have their tax status invalidated. Customs authorities do allow for amendment of these declarations, but the window for corrections is limited to 3 years from the date of the original declaration. After 3 years, the door closes permanently. The buyer who acquires a vessel with a Code 7100 declaration on its history more than 3 years after the original declaration date inherits the full VAT liability with no path to remediation. That is a $400,000 mistake measured directly in euros.
The complexity multiplies in cross-border sales. EU-based companies seeking VAT refunds use the 8th directive. Non-EU companies, like those based in the United States or Canada, must navigate the 13th directive, which requires strict reciprocity between the home country and the specific EU member state. Reciprocity rules vary by country, by year, by administrative interpretation, and no broker is going to take responsibility for getting it wrong on your behalf. Then there is the returned goods relief trap. If a vessel was exported from the EU for more than 3 years, then returned without following the specific returned goods relief protocols, the original VAT paid status is extinguished. The new owner becomes liable for the full tax amount upon re-entry, a $400,000 mistake created entirely by paperwork. A buyer who accepts a VAT paid assertion from a broker without conducting a forensic audit of the vessel's documentation chain, including original VAT invoice, T2L, customs procedure codes, and export and re-entry history, is gambling 6 figures on a verbal promise. The fifth force is the surveyor's dilemma, and this is where most $400,000 mistakes are actually born. The standard marine survey is a generalist inspection. The surveyor is qualified, experienced, and competent, but the surveyor is not, by definition, an engine surveyor. A general survey focuses on hull integrity, safety equipment, and general system functionality. The surveyor may pop the cowling on the engines, check for oil leaks, look for cracked plug leads, observe the engines running at idle. That is the limit of the inspection. The general survey does not include computer diagnostics. It does not include oil chromatography. It does not include thermal imaging under load. It does not include bore scoping of cylinder walls. And a $400,000 W6 overhaul does not show up on a visual inspection. It shows up in the data. Computer diagnostics pulled from the engine control unit reveal the complete operational dossier. Not just total hours, but how many of those hours were spent at wide-open throttle. A high WOT percentage indicates an engine that has been chronically stressed. Excessive idling, the opposite signal, indicates carbon buildup and the onset of cylinder glazing. Thermal imaging under load detects localized overheating that the engine's standard analog gauges will never capture.
A thermostat can read perfectly at the top of the power head while the bottom of the engine is overheating due to a localized blockage in the cooling galleries. Only thermal imaging catches that. Oil chromatography is the forensic gold standard. A laboratory analysis of the engine oil reveals the wear metals suspended in the lubrication system. High chromium indicates piston ring wear. High lead or copper indicates bearing failure. High iron indicates liner wear. High aluminum can indicate piston damage. The oil tells the truth. The engine cannot hide what it is shedding into its own lubrication. Bore scoping adds the final visual layer. A flexible camera inserted through the spark plug holes or injector ports allows direct visual inspection of cylinder walls, valves, and combustion chamber surfaces. Scuffing, scoring, loss of factory cross-hatching, all of these are precursors to catastrophic mechanical failure. None of these tools are part of a standard general survey. And then there is the scheduling mistake that compounds everything. Many buyers, encouraged by what experienced surveyors openly call lazy brokers, schedule the general survey and the mechanical survey for the same day. Both surveyors arrive at the boat together. The buyer pays for both. The buyer pays for the haul-out. The buyer pays for the pressure washing of the hull. And if the mechanical survey reveals that the engines need a $400,000 W6 overhaul, the buyer has already spent thousands of dollars on a survey package they no longer need. The correct sequence is brutal in its simplicity. Mechanical survey first, independent, standalone. If the engines fail the mechanical survey, the buyer terminates the transaction before any other costs are incurred. Only if the engines pass does the general survey, the haul-out, and the hull inspection proceed. Most buyers reverse this order, and most buyers pay for the privilege. The sixth force is the ownership economics gap, and this is the slow-motion version of the $400,000 mistake. The industry benchmark is called the 10% rule. Annual operating cost typically ranges from 10% to 20% of the vessel's market value. On a $10 million yacht, baseline operating cost is approximately $1.317 million per year, every year, forever. Crew salaries and benefits dominate at roughly 35% of the budget, around $460,000 annually. A professional captain alone runs $162,500 to $180,000 annually. A dedicated engineer runs about $90,000.
And these are the people protecting the asset. So undercrewing or hiring inexperienced personnel is itself a $400,000 mistake waiting to happen. A qualified engineer catches a $10,000 problem before it escalates into a $400,000 engine failure. That is the hedge. Insurance lands around 11% of the operating budget, roughly $150,000, with significant variation based on geography and deductible structure. Maintenance and repairs sit at 9%, about $120,000 per year, but only if preventive maintenance is performed religiously. Fuel costs 8%, roughly $100,000 based on about 200 hours of engine operation per year. Dockage and mooring runs 5%, about $60,000, with serious volatility between Florida and the Mediterranean. And then the line item most buyers ignore entirely, the refit reserve. 4% of the budget, about $50,000 per year, set aside to fund the major refits that occur every 5 to 7 years. Those refits cost 5 to 10% of vessel value when they hit. On a $10 million vessel, that is a $500,000 to $1 million capital call every half-decade. Buyers who skip the refit reserve face that capital call with no fund in place. That is when boats get listed mid-refit, half torn apart, at fire sale prices. That is the second wave of the $400,000 mistake. The seventh force is the loss of charter income trap. Many owners offset operating costs by chartering the vessel. The business model looks compelling on paper. A well-operated charter yacht in the Mediterranean can generate enough revenue to materially offset annual carrying costs. But the model is fragile. A single mechanical failure at the wrong time of year does more than just trigger a repair bill. It eliminates an entire season of charter income. Insurance policies for commercial yachts often include loss of hire coverage, but the coverage is heavily restricted. A typical policy covers up to 60 or 120 days of lost income, and only after a deductible period of 21 to 60 days, during which the owner bears the full cost of lost revenue, with no insurance payout. A $400,000 engine failure that occurs at the start of the Mediterranean summer season triggers the repair bill, the 21 to 60-day deductible window of zero insurance compensation, and then potentially uncovered weeks beyond the 60 to 120-day policy maximum. The total economic damage frequently exceeds $1 million.
And the motor yacht Kanga, which was a total loss to fire, demonstrates the most extreme version of this dynamic. The physical asset is gone, but so is the entire charter season. And once the workforce dynamics are added, the picture gets worse. An estimated 400,000 insurance and maritime professionals are retiring across the industry. The transition from traditional advisory systems to delegated systems and AI-powered compliance platforms is changing the risk model. Owners who rely on legacy gentlemen's agreements for maintenance and crewing increasingly find themselves exposed when those informal systems break down. The eighth force is technology, and this is where the modern buyer has tools the previous generation simply did not. Remote monitoring systems like TowPro and Anchor Guardian now use marine telematics to track every operational parameter in real time: wind speed, anchor tension, tenderline tension during transit. Tender loss alone has become a significant exposure as superyacht tenders have grown to 12 to 15 meters and exceed $1 million in value. A tender lost or damaged in transit can mean a guest season ruined and an insurance claim that takes months to resolve. NMEA network integration takes the data deeper. On modern refits like the World Cruiser Falcon, the skipper can log in to the NMEA network from a phone and monitor engine gauges, boat speed, exhaust temperatures, and system health in real time. A 5-degree rise in exhaust temperature is the early warning sign of a failing impeller or a blocked heat exchanger. Caught at 5 degrees, the fix is a couple of hours of labor and a few $100s in parts. Missed at 5 degrees, the same problem becomes a seized water pump, a cracked exhaust manifold, and a $400,000 engine failure. Real-time monitoring is no longer a luxury. In 2026, it is the baseline expectation for any serious owner.
A vessel without modern telemetry is, by definition, operating blind. The ninth force is the emotional investment pitfall, and this is the underlying psychology that creates every $400,000 mistake. The superyacht industry openly refers to yacht acquisitions as emotional investments. That phrase is a euphemism. It really means suboptimal financial decisions justified by lifestyle aspiration. The buyers who avoid the $400K mistake are the ones who treat the yacht like a business asset. They demand detailed maintenance records. They demand chain of custody documentation on every refit. They hire independent advisors who are not paid by the broker. They run mechanical surveys before general surveys. They verify VAT and customs documentation forensically. They build refit reserves from day one. They hire qualified crew and pay them properly. And critically, when records are missing, they apply the correct default assumption. The safest bet when maintenance records are absent or incomplete is to assume the engine has not been maintained. The buyers who lose $400,000 are the buyers who fall in love at the boat show, sign because the photos are beautiful, and trust because the broker is friendly. The market punishes that approach with mathematical consistency. So if you were staring at a YachtWorld listing right now, looking at a beautiful $4 to $10 million motor yacht and feeling the pull of the dream, the $400,000 mistake is not somewhere out there in the abstract. It is in that specific boat. You just have not found it yet. But beneath the chaos, the mistake is predictable. And now, as promised, here is the 5-step pre-purchase forensic filter. Run this on any yacht you are considering. You will know in 60 seconds whether you are about to inherit a $400K problem or actually buy a sound asset. Step 1. Engine hour reality check. Pull the total engine hours. Calculate how close those hours are to the next W6 overhaul threshold at 6,000 hours. Then check the calendar date of the last documented major service. If either the hour count or the 8-year clock is within 15% of the threshold, the W6 overhaul is your responsibility, not the seller's. Discount your offer accordingly or walk away. Step 2. Mechanical survey first. Schedule a specialized engine survey with computer diagnostics, oil chromatography, and bore scoping. Schedule it before the general survey, before the haul-out, before any other expense. If the engines fail this survey, terminate the deal immediately and save yourself 5 figures in non-refundable costs. Step 3. Documentation forensics. Verify the VAT paid status with the original invoice, the T2L document, and the Customs Declaration Procedure Code. Confirm the code is 4000, not 7100. Check the date of the original declaration against the 3-year amendment window. If the vessel was exported from the EU and returned, verify the returned goods relief paperwork was filed correctly. If any of this documentation is missing or unclear, factor 20% of vessel value into your risk model. Step 4. Structural truth audit. Inspect every wood joint for the diagnostic signs of varnish stacking. Heavy, opaque finishes, specifically at miter joints, are a red flag. Measure teak deck depth. Below 3 mm is the wear limit. Below 3 mm means the deck is on borrowed time, and the fasteners are already ingress points. Step 5. Ownership economics honesty. Multiply the purchase price by 10% to 15%. That is your annual operating cost. Add a separate refit reserve at 4% of vessel value per year. Total that number against your actual sustainable annual budget. If the number wrecks your financial plan, the boat is too expensive, regardless of the listing price. Run these 5 checks together, and the $400,000 mistake stops being a mystery. Some buyers inherit the mistake because they trusted a survey that was never designed to catch it. Some inherit it because they accepted a VAT-paid verbal assertion without an audit. Some inherit it because they fell for stacked varnish and sanded teak. Some inherit it because they bought a low-hour boat that had been rotting in the slip for a decade. Some inherit it because they reversed the survey sequence and paid for inspections they never needed. And some inherit it simply because they treated the purchase as an emotional investment instead of an industrial acquisition. The luxury yacht market in 2026 is not the death of the dream. It is the brutal, overdue return of due diligence as the price of entry. The buyers who do their homework right now with eyes wide open are inheriting assets at fair prices and protecting them with discipline. The buyers who skip the homework are funding everyone else's invoices. If this helped you finally understand how the $400,000 mistake actually happens, hit subscribe so you do not miss the next deep dive into the real economics of luxury yacht ownership. Now go open that listing again with new eyes. You will see things you could not see before.